Back. Time to jump back into 1 Samuel chapter 14. Let's go ahead and pray. Father in heaven, God, thank you so much for bringing us together this morning, Lord. Thank you for your word, how it grows us and brings us closer to your heart and teaches us about your nature and how to live life, Father. I pray for the viewers watching this that you would illuminate their minds and help them to know you better, grow closer to you, and keep walking in the footsteps of your Son. In Jesus' holy name, amen. All right, so by the way, if you're joining on the fast, congratulations. Keep going. You're almost done with day 2. We're going to break it tomorrow as we do the 8th step in the path of strength at 2 p.m. And you will find that this should be fun. Most of the rest of this last day, you're going to be fine. Tomorrow, you'll probably be hungry thinking about eating it too. But if you've done these 2 days already, you realize it's not quite as hard as you thought it would be. And hopefully you're seeking God in prayer and growing closer to him and hearing more from him. And he's revealing himself to you. Okay, we're going to jump in. So we left off yesterday in 1 Samuel chapter 14, the first part. And we saw that Jonathan had kind of got sick of waiting and had gone up with his armor bearer and attacked the Philistine garrison. And then there had been an earthquake, and the Philistines had panicked and began, killing each other. And in the confusion, they were sort of fleeing. And Saul, finally, with much reluctance, got into the battle and chased the Philistines away. Okay, but now, they're still fighting, but it shifted to Beth Aven, they're saying. So they pushed him out of Michmash. Going to the west, towards the Mediterranean Sea, they're chasing the Philistines back to their home. All right, in verse 24, it says, "And the men of Israel were distressed in that day, for Saul had placed the people under oath, saying, 'Cursed is the man who eats any food until evening, before I have taken vengeance on my enemies.' So none of the people tasted food. Now all the people of the land came to a forest, and there was honey on the ground. And when the people had come into the woods, there was the honey, dripping, but no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard his father charge the people with the oath. Therefore he stretched out the end of the rod that was in his hand, and dipped it in a honeycomb, and put his hand to his mouth, and his countenance brightened." That means his face brightened. Then one of the people said, "Your father strictly charged the people with an oath, saying, 'Cursed is the man who eats food this day.' And the people were faint. But Jonathan said, 'My father has troubled the land. Look, now how my countenance has brightened, because I tasted a little of this honey. How much better if the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies, which they found. For now, would there not have been a much greater slaughter among the Philistines?'" So this is an ongoing battle that's taking the whole day. And in this, Saul has given a vow. He's made an oath, and he's basically made a law for the people and said, "Cursed is anyone," which apparently we're going to find out means you'll die. Curse doesn't just mean, people are going to look at you funny. You're going to see that this means death penalty if you break it. So he's saying, "Cursed is the man who eats any food until evening, before I have taken vengeance on my enemies." So none of the people tasted food. Jonathan is pointing out later, this is impractical and not wise. Okay? It's not a fast. He's forcibly causing the people to fast, but not for spiritual reasons, not to grow closer to God. He's not telling them fast for God's favor. He's not saying fast and repent of sins that God may be with us, because we learned our lesson, a long time ago under Eli and when Samuel was young. Nope. His reason is, Cursed is anyone who eats food before I have taken vengeance on my enemies. Well, if they're your enemies, Saul, why did Jonathan start the battle? Why were you so reluctant to get into it? Now that there's this huge earthquake that Yahweh himself has stirred up, now you're fighting? And you think they're your enemies? You think it's all about you. This is the beginning of us seeing in Saul the building of great pride. We're beginning to see pride rear its ugly head in him. And, insecurity, we saw insecurity in him before. Great insecurity is actually the sign of great pride. It's just a negative version of it. But a person who is that insecure can act very pridefully and arrogantly and boastfully all of a sudden because they're trying to fill this hole they feel, this insecurity. True humility means you're not insecure. Insecurity is not humility. Humility is humbling yourself to the point where you say, my opinion about myself doesn't matter. Negative or positive. I just need to know what God thinks about me, how he values me, and set my identity in that and be at peace. That's humility. Be confident. That's humility. But Saul here is, the Philistines are the enemy of the entire people of Israel, not to mention Yahweh. They've already demonstrated they're an enemy of God himself with what they try to do with the ark. Okay? So these are God's enemies. David would never have said this. David's outrage in front of Goliath was that not that he had opposed David, not that he opposed Saul, not that he'd even opposed Israel and its armies as an affront to them personally, but that he was opposing the armies of Yahweh, and that he was defaming and mocking Yahweh. That was what David's outrage was. So that should be Saul's outrage. He should be outraged for God. He should say, at least say he should have said, before we have taken vengeance on God's enemies, on Yahweh's enemies. Or at a minimum, even if you're not going to be that spiritually mature, at a minimum, before we have taken vengeance on our enemies, at least a good leader would do that. But instead, no, before I have taken vengeance on my enemies. This is all about him now. He didn't even want to get in the battle. He was scared to death, and now it's all about him and his glory. And you, the people, are not going to eat until I've gotten my glory. That's what he said. And this shows what a terrible man he was. It's not even, the true Saul is being revealed. His true character. The reason the Lamb of God is the only one worthy to take the scroll out of the hand of God the Father, which is a real estate deed to the earth as his inheritance, is because Jesus is the only king who ever laid down his life for his people. Every other king on earth has been perfectly happy to let other men go die in battle so that they could expand their kingdom. They sacrifice other men who are viewed as less important, who are making a sacrifice for the glory of the kingdom in order to get glory for themselves. Jesus gave up his glory, died for us, to make a kingdom for us of peace. That's why he's worthy to take the scroll and so unique. So Saul is following in the steps of every pagan king. Sacrifice the people's well-being for his glory. So the honey, is just representing the sweetness is really a symbol for dessert. So they've already begun to conquer. They've already really entered into the quote unquote meat of the day or the meal of the day in conquering the Philistines so far. So this honey represents the fact that they're in the dessert portion. It's time to mop up, what's left of these Philistines, and they are chasing them. But it requires energy to chase somebody. And Jonathan was not aware of because he and the armor bearer had been gone, right? They were not there. So he didn't hear this oath. He wasn't in the camp. So he's just doing what's natural. And the sugar and the honey is giving him some energy right away. That's why his face is brightening. And he's saying, this is very curious. So Jonathan, you kind of see a recognition in Jonathan that his father's not the best leader. I don't know exactly how old Jonathan is here. I have trouble. He's not going to be much older than early 20s. But just because we know Saul was kind of chosen fairly young. Saul was probably, I guess we could say, he's probably about he probably was at least 30 when he was chosen, just because of knowing God's rules about when a man can go into service for God, being at age 30. So Jonathan's probably, this has been a couple years. I don't know. He's probably late teens. Saul may be a little older than 30. It's hard to know exactly. Anyways, he's definitely not old. But he's already seen twice now. His dad had many more forces and didn't act. And Jonathan's acted twice with less forces, with much more faith. And he's had a victory twice. And now his dad, who hasn't done anything, is telling everybody, don't eat. And he's like, I just ate. It's a stupid rule he made. And he's actually voicing it. This is what's curious. He says, my father has troubled the land. Look how my face brightened when I tasted a little of this honey. How much better, so he's openly saying, how much better if the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies. When the Philistines fled, they left behind food. So they could have eaten it, to get energy and keep going. For how would there not have been a much greater slaughter among the Philistines? And that sounds like, is that really a desirable outcome? Well, yes, Israel's supposed to have cleared out all of the Philistines and the Canaanites. They're not supposed to be tolerating their presence because this land was promised to Abraham. This was a command of God. We know the Philistines only bring in corruption and false religion and oppression and murder and taxes and tribute, and all these things. So weakening the Philistines is a good thing, and God is perfectly capable of knowing when the Philistines are killed and come before him, whether they need to go to heaven or not, based on what they knew and their heart attitude towards him. So we see, anyways, verse 31. Now they had driven back the Philistines that day from Michmash to Ajalon. So Michmash means place of storage, like think barns. Okay. Ajalon means place of the gazelles. So this is like going from the place of something stored up to the place of fast running things, gazelles. And that's kind of the image. Like Saul originally was like stored up for battle, and they were waiting for prosperity, waiting for freedom. All of this was like potential, building up, getting prepared. The Philistines came, camped there, stored up victory, potential victory, not realized yet. Now the victory has come. The freedom has come. The Israelites are chasing the Philistines away to the place of the gazelles. So they're running for their lives. And it's about halfway. Ajalon is a city and a valley. It's very beautiful. If you want to look it up on Google Images, spelled, I believe the way you'll spell it for the modern spelling is Aylon, Ajalon. The Ajalon Valley, and there was a city named Ajalon. So if you look it up on maps, it's about halfway to the Mediterranean coast from Jerusalem. Not quite halfway, but almost. About 15 miles from Michmash. So they chase these guys 15 miles. That's a long distance to chase people on foot that have chariots and you don't, and they have horses and you don't, and they're still chasing them. I imagine a lot of the horse guys got away. But there was many infantry. But anyways, it said, now they had driven back the Philistines that day from Michmash to Ayalon. So the people were very faint. I get one more. That's halfway to home, by the way, because the Philistines live on the coast, so they're chasing them halfway home. And the people rushed on the spoil, took sheep, oxen, and calves, and slaughtered them on the ground. And the people ate them with the blood. Now, we've seen Israel do this before, okay? They get desperate for meat, and they start eating things raw instead of cooking them. The spoil, this is their own sheep, oxen, and calves, most likely, that the raiding parties, took from villages locally. Could have been some of the Philistines' own stuff, but I'm sure they didn't kill all of them. They just killed enough to eat. But this is a lot of desperation for one day of not eating, okay? Granted, you've been really working hard, and so your body is demanding food. That makes sense. But still, come on. You can have spiritual patience to make a fire and cook it. Then they told Saul, saying, look, the people are sinning against the Lord by eating with the blood, right? I believe that's Leviticus 17 that talks about the importance of the blood and how we are never to eat of it, never eat blood. And that is the one thing that the new dietary rules of the New Testament don't change. In Acts 15, when the apostles send a letter to the Gentiles and tell them what morality they have to follow, they tell them no sexual immorality. They didn't have to tell them no theft and no murder. People all know that. Okay. But they said no sexual immorality and no eating of blood. Okay. No eating the blood of anything. So again, disease, other reasons, but it is an offense to God. And he doesn't like people getting a taste for blood. It's disgusting too. But so this is the law of God, and it is still in place for us Gentiles. So he said, you have dealt treacherously. Roll a large stone to me this day. Curious phrase, treacherously. I guess there's still, he still has faith. Saul is still showing faith in God, even though he's beginning to show hints of pride and arrogance. He's saying you have dealt treacherously. Treacherously against who, Saul? And in what way? Well, in what way? They have violated the law of God and have sinned, okay? And so he's saying you're going to lose Yahweh's favor. Like God, we're going to lose God's favor. And that's treacherous against us as a people because we're not going to kill as many Philistines. You're hurting the cause by doing this because you're losing God's favor. But I bet there's a deeper, he doesn't say against who specifically. So I bet in his mind, it's more you have dealt treacherously with me. Because it's my vengeance we're trying to get on my enemies. And you've betrayed me by hurting our chances at having God's favor because you guys are just objects in this whole thing. Then Saul said, disperse yourselves among the people and say to them, bring me here every man's ox and every man's sheep. Slaughter them here and eat, and do not sin against the Lord by eating with the blood. So he is following the law of God. He is respecting the law of God. He has some faith intact. So every one of the people brought his ox with him that night and slaughtered it there. Then Saul built an altar to the Lord. This was the first altar that he built to the Lord. That's a very interesting statement. So again, we talked about how the king is not supposed to be doing priestly duties. He didn't call Samuel to come do it. He didn't call the other priests, the high priest over to do it. He did it. But we see in other places where this wasn't necessarily frowned on at the time. So, because the ark was moving around and the tabernacle was moving around. So perhaps God is not condemning this, or perhaps it's just a commentary saying, yeah, this isn't the ideal. And when it's saying this is the first altar that he built to the Lord, it's saying Saul did this more than once. And this is the beginning of a problem where certain kings think that they can just build altars wherever, and would eventually culminate in the sin of Jeroboam, instituting the 2 golden calves in Dan and Bethel. Anyways, verse 36. Now Saul said, let us go down after the Philistines by night and plunder them until morning light, and let us not leave a man of them. And they said, do whatever seems good to you. Then the priest said, let us draw near to God here. Okay, so Saul, 37, so Saul asked counsel of God, shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you deliver them into the hand of Israel? But he did not answer him that day. Okay, so Saul has an idea. He's like, okay, we've eaten. Let's go get more Philistines. Let's go kill and plunder them all night. And the people are like, do whatever seems good to you. They're just eating, full stomachs, like, whatever you say, you're the king. Somewhere Samuel's saying, I told you. Then the priest said, hey, let's go ask God. So Saul says, okay. So he asks God, but God doesn't answer. So Saul perceives, again, he now is aware of how God works. He knows Yahweh. He's experienced them. He prophesied. He respects the law of God. Samuel has taught him, discipled him. So he's realizing God isn't answering. That must mean there's a sin of some kind. And Saul said, come over here, all you chiefs of the people, and know and see what this sin was today. For as the Lord lives, who saves Israel, though it be in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die. Okay, so now we're seeing anything, and this is really rash again, okay? Because what is this sin, he's saying? And why is he so concerned? Ultimately, is he really concerned because he's mad that God is offended? No, he's mad that God won't approve of his plan to go kill more and get more plunder. That God won't answer him to let them go do his plan. Okay, that's why he's mad about whatever this sin is. He's mad about it for very practical reasons that affect himself, not about God's heart or God's nature. So he's so mad, he doesn't know what this sin is. The sin could be somebody told a lie. The sin could be somebody, did something wrong. Somebody stole something. Okay. Yet he wants to put them to death for this, which isn't just. That isn't something you do the death penalty for until you know what the sin is. So this is understanding the basics of the law, but not really caring about the why behind it. Respecting and revering God enough to know we have to have his favor, and we have sinned, which has cost us his favor, but I'm still very focused on my agenda, what I want done, and so I'm mad that I don't have God's favor. Who sinned? I'm going to kill you. Okay? Yet, if he was truly wise and following the law of God, he would know we must discover the sin and then decide what to do and seek God's voice on what to do. We should, if we're seeking God's voice on whether to pursue the Philistines and kill a pagan people, shouldn't we be asking God what to do as punishment for whatever sin it is we're going to discover? And how rash to say, even if it were my own son. He's never imagining it is. He's being very stupid and rash. Sounds like he's getting full of anger and full of himself here. He shall surely die. So he is now exhibiting pride in his arrogance, in his power. He is finally seen that he actually has power. He thinks this battle has been won by him. He's forgetting it was the earthquake and Jonathan, but he's claiming the victory for himself and what he's done. If he hadn't assembled everybody, then it wouldn't have happened. He didn't go hide in a hidey hole. At least he and the 600 men were willing to fight even if they died, and now he got the victory. So he's, in his mind, attributing faith to himself in that. And he made an oath, and nobody ate. Everybody feared him and obeyed him and not eating when he made that oath. So now he's gaining confidence in his power. He's saying, I give a command, and they do it. And so now, who sinned? They shall surely die, even if it's my own son. But not a man among all the people answered him. I'll tell you what, Saul, you know who sinned? You. You sinned quite a bit this day. You've been rash, you've been unwise, you've been unloving, you've been selfish, you've been fearful. You're willing to kill somebody when you're not sure what the sin was. If it was murder, okay. If it was something that in the law of God gets the death penalty, okay. But not if it's a sin that doesn't deserve the death penalty according to God's law. You know who else sinned? The Philistines. You know who else sinned? The people eating blood. That was against the law of God. Anyways, we're going to see what is revealed here. God has orchestrated this because God is aware of all those sins, but he's allowing Jonathan's sin to be revealed in order to knock Saul right back down a notch. He just rose up in arrogance. He's going to get knocked right back down. Then he said to all Israel, you be on one side, and my son Jonathan and I will be on the other side. And, okay, Saul, why that division? Why that division? Because that isn't the most expedient form. Because what they're going to do is they're going to cast the Urim and the Thummim, these dice, we're not sure exactly what they were, that the priest had in his breastplate to discern God's will. And it's going to come up yes or no and reveal who is guilty. If you're trying to get to the matter as fast as possible, you divide the people in equal halves, and then whatever half, you divide that in half again, and then that in half again, and you keep going, okay, in that way. Or by tribe, by clan, by family, like they've done in the past. But no, Saul, in his arrogance and pride, says, you the people on one side, me and Jonathan on the other, because I have no doubt it's you the people. Right? Because he's not imagining it's him or Jonathan. Because he just pronounced death. Does he really want to kill his son Jonathan? No. He's not thinking he's going to be doing that. That's why he invoked Jonathan's name. Because like, there's no way it's Jonathan. So I'm going to say, even if it was Jonathan, just to show them how just and true and pure I am in my justice, even if it's Jonathan. But there's no way it's Jonathan, so I'm going to say, me and Jonathan over here. I know it's not me. Well, what if it was you, Saul? You have many sins this day. Why won't the lots fall on Saul? Because he would have to kill himself. All right, they would have to kill the anointed, so God can't reveal those sins with these lots. He's thinking the sins among the people. But what is the sin of the people? Well, they were all eating blood. So this is really stupid, Saul. If the lot fell on the people, it would fall on them as a whole. and then you have to kill all your people that just won the victory. And who's going to do the killing? I mean, you're going to get the people to all commit suicide? How are you going to give orders for everybody to kill themselves? You know, so the lots aren't going to reveal that either. But he thinks it's among the people. So imagine, and the people said to Saul, do what seems good to you. They are just like, do what seems good to you. Okay, we're starting to see we have to do what this king says now. And he doesn't always say the smartest things. That didn't occur to them before they asked for a king. Therefore, Saul said to the Lord God of Israel, give a perfect lot. What in the world? You're commanding God now. You're telling him, give us a perfect lot, a perfect cast of the dice. Tell us what's, he's telling God how to do it. So Saul and Jonathan were taken, but the people escaped, meaning the lots fell on Saul and Jonathan. It revealed they had the sin. Imagine Saul's face then. Oh, no. Oh, no. I just said, let them die. And now it's me or my son. All of a sudden, he's realizing how stupid he is. At that point, maybe he should have tucked tail, and said, you know what? Something's wrong here, but he can't. And Saul said, cast lots between my son Jonathan and me. So Jonathan was taken. Then Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what you have done. And I wonder in that moment, why Saul even did that next roll. Because it's just between him and Jonathan. If you really think you're innocent and you have no guilt, why would you not at that point say, it was me, and come up with some sin you think you did? I'm sorry, now I must die. And sacrifice yourself for your son. Because what's more important, killing Philistines or your son's life? If you think it could be your son. If you think it could be you, why? It's like, if I think it's me, why am I going to take the chance on the roll coming up on my son and him dying? Why not just say, I did it, kill me then, and then see what the people do? Why put your son at risk? If you're hoping it's your son, why are you hoping it's your son? Because the only thing that's been blocked is the ability to go after the Philistines. You're going to sacrifice your son so that you can go get more Philistines? He's lost in the process, and he's not thinking. Tell me what you've done, Jonathan. He's mad. Okay. Jonathan told him and said, I only tasted a little honey on the end of the rod that was in my hand. So now I must die? He broke his father's oath. The king made a random command, and Jonathan violated it. Now he has to die. And that's the truth. That's basically, there is a legal principle there and a spiritual principle. When a governing authority that God has set in place, and this is why it was so stupid for Israel to ask for a king, because until that point, they didn't have an official king. They were just under God's protection, and they could have stayed that way and had freedom. But when God sets a government over a people, you have to, if you do not obey what the government says, it's a sin. Unless the government is commanding you to do something that violates the will of God. Being forced to take injectable cures is against the will of God. You are not required to do that. That is the government overstepping its bounds. If the government told you cannot honor the Sabbath, or you can't go to church, or you have to murder somebody, or you have to abort your baby, those things are all against the law of God. And when you violate the law, you don't violate the law of God to honor the government. But If it's something else like you must recycle glass bottles whether you want to or not, if the government has the legal right to force us to do things like that, and it's not against the law of God, and so we have to do it if that's what they say, even if I don't like it. Okay? So this is a principle that God has established. When he puts human authority in place, you have to obey it or you have to die, because it is viewed as but treachery against the government. But this has a higher principle in that, when we break the law of God, any of his laws, in the same way that this is being viewed as an offense by Saul, our rebellion against the law of God is a treacherous offense against the kingdom of God. He is the king, and we have committed treason. We've been treacherous with him by disobeying the laws of his kingdom. Thankfully, because he's such an amazing king and God, all of the laws of his kingdom are beneficial for us, good for society, loving, not for our harm. Saul's was for their harm. God's are not. Sometimes it may be hard to see that with God's law. You have to study and understand the heart and the spirit behind it. And then when you do, you realize, oh, this was loving. I get it. Anyways, Saul answered, God, do so and more also, for you shall surely die, Jonathan. I can't imagine that. What ego. What ego. This is a stupid law that he made, an oath, that has no moral value. It was a rash thing he did to get vengeance. And now he's going to kill his son over it? How do you think Jonathan felt in that moment? I've not only been a good son, I'm not only my father's son, who's supposed to love me, who raised me, but I've achieved these victories for him twice. And over tasting a little honey, he's going to kill me. How motivated do you think Jonathan was to serve his father in the future? But the people said to Saul, shall Jonathan die, who has accomplished this great deliverance in Israel? Certainly not. As the Lord lives, not one hair of his head shall fall to the ground, for he has worked with God this day. So the people rescued Jonathan, and he did not die. And that is the truth about kings. They only rule as long as they have the people's support. And they kind of know that. If the people collectively decide, we're not doing what you said, that king has no power. He only has power through the submission of the people. Generally, because God put him there, the people are submitted. But in a moment like this, the people have rebelled universally. They said, so Saul made this rash oath, and they all obeyed that. He told them, stop eating blood. They all obeyed that. He's telling them we're going to go fight all night. They're tired. They're going to say, okay, we'll do that. He's saying, get into groups. We got to figure out who is the sinner. They agreed to that. But now he's given a command, we're going to kill my son. They're like, no, you're not. Because he's the real hero this day, not you. His name's not being mentioned. They say, shall Jonathan die, who has accomplished this great deliverance in Israel? They're not saying Saul has. They're saying Jonathan has. Certainly not. As the Lord lives, not one hair of his head shall fall to the ground, for he has worked with God this day. I'm sure the story, the armor bearer has been telling it, of Jonathan's faith and how they killed 20 men up there in the garrison with just 2 of them. The people know that God was with them, that God worked through Jonathan. They're like, no, this is not just. We're not doing this. And so it would be left to Saul to kill his own son. He was going to have his people do it. People saying, nope. So now he would have to do it. But they're basically rescuing Jonathan. They're taking him away from his own father and saying, nope, he's not going to die. So Saul comes out of this whole thing. He thought he was being lifted up as a great king who had authority and destroyed the Philistines. And in the end, he's realizing, no, back down. I've lost the respect of my son and the love of my son. The people have just completely disobeyed me, so my authority is very weak. And they've ascribed the victory to him and to God and not to me, which is the truth. So he is humbled, but moves into insecurity again instead of true humility. Then Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. So that was the end. They did not go and get any more Philistines. Verse 47. So Saul established his sovereignty over Israel. So slowly he's building the kingdom after this, and now he's apparently gaining more confidence in battle because it says he fought against all his enemies on every side, against Moab, which is central Jordan to the east, against the people of Ammon, which is northern Jordan to the east, against Edom, which is, again, southern Jordan to the east, against the kings of Zobah, which is up in where the Golan Heights is now, it's up in southern Syria, and against the Philistines, which is the Gaza Strip down here in the left. Notice these are the same enemies Israel has today. The sons of Ammon, Moab, and Edom are still in they're in the West Bank now in Israel. And the Philistines, the Palestinians, are still down in the Gaza Strip. And we still have problems with Hezbollah up in the north of Israel, the northern border. These are the same enemies. But Saul is pushing them back. Okay. Wherever he turned, he harassed them. And he gathered an army and attacked the Amalekites. And I believe that the Amalekites founded the city of Mecca. That's my operating theory. I've got some evidence for it. I haven't proven it, but that's what I believe is true. So I believe Muhammad and thus Islam came from the Amalekites, who are God's great enemy in Scripture. He gathered an army and attacked the Amalekites, which would be southern, even Saudi Arabia. But those guys would come in and raid from the south. So they didn't stay in Saudi Arabia. And he gathered an army and attacked the Amalekites and delivered Israel from the hands of those who plundered them. So the Amalekites would come in on raids and plunder, and that's the same thing Muhammad used to do. The sons of Saul, now it's going to list his family. Okay, this is Saul's family. And I believe that his son's name, the meanings tell us the transition Saul is making in his character and spirit. I believe his daughter's names represent his prosperity, or his thoughts about his own prosperity, which are good in this case. I believe that his wife's name is revealing something to us about what his heart is married to. And then Abner's name, his general, reveals something as well. So let's go look at them. The sons of Saul were Jonathan, Jishui, and Malchishua. Now, some versions will say Ishvi instead of Jishui, and Ishvi is really the right one. Mine is saying Jishui. But Malchishua, you may notice the Shua is the same ending as Yeshua of Joshua. And we know Jesus' name, Yeshua, means Yahweh is salvation. Melech means king. So you see that Malchishua is the king is salvation. That is what that name means. Ishvi means man of Yahweh. And Jonathan, of course, we said means Yahweh has given. So we start, his firstborn was Jonathan. Yahweh has given. He's given a son, but he's given a gift to Israel, this deliverer. Saul was the one asked for, but God actually gave Jonathan. So Saul named his firstborn son with a very good godly name, Yahweh has given. The secondborn, he's saying, man of Yahweh. And this is, since his son is a baby, then is it referring to his son, or is it referring to himself? Probably himself. But how does he mean it? How does he mean it? Does he mean it like, I'm a man of Yahweh, like I submit to the law of God and I follow him? Or does he mean, I'm a man of Yahweh? God, Yahweh has my back. God is he's the one who chose me. He's the one who anointed me. I think it's a mix of the two in his mind. Because the third one, the king of salvation, is now fully prideful. Now, Yahweh is salvation, Joshua, not Malchishua, not the king of salvation, unless you mean the king of kings. But I don't think Saul means that. He doesn't understand anything about the king of kings. You know how I know? Because the teachings about the Messiah at this time were very limited. And the promise had not yet been given to King David that the Messiah would come from him. So the king being referred to in his mind is himself. The king is the deliverer, is what it means. He's delivered his people from all the enemies. And the names, so we see his through these sons' names, we see him transitioning from a man who's thankful to God to a man who's getting some pride to a man who's fully arrogant. And the names of his two daughters were these. The name of the firstborn was Merab, and the name of the younger, Michal. And we'll see that Michal becomes the wife of King David. It's his first wife. Okay? Merab means from greatness or from increase, fruitfulness. Think, it's basically he's saying, boy, I'm fruitful. I'm having lots of sons and daughters. I've got lots of prosperity coming to it. So he's like just talking about, it's kind of like, I'm recognizing my prosperity. That's a good thing. I'm glad he is. There's no mention of Yahweh there, though. He's just kind of making a statement. Michal means who is like God. Who is like God is the most likely meaning. So he's have a moment of awe. He's like saying, who is like God? But he doesn't use Yahweh here, more generic term of God. I don't see anything wrong with that. I think he generally is saying in this moment, he believes God as his provider. I believe he believes Yahweh as his provider. And I believe that he's pretty much thankful. He's showing some gratitude through these names, but he still is believing that it all revolves around him, which is why his son is named Malchishua. Now, the name of Saul's wife was Ahinoam, and the daughter of Ahimaaz. Ahimaaz was a man. Okay, it's her father, right? So Ahinoam means my brother is sweetness, or my kindred, my family is sweetness. Like sweetness is my heart, almost. Sweetness is my heart. But Ahimaaz means my brother is wrath or anger. So sweetness, the daughter of anger and wrath, okay, as close to Saul. So I believe this is figurative, the meaning of the names, in that Saul has great wrath and anger. We see this also popping up in him, anger, multiple times. Like we just saw it against Jonathan. And he's got great anger against the enemies of Israel, and it's sweet to him, these battles. Which isn't good. The name of the commander of his army, the general of his army, was Abner, the son of Ner, Saul's uncle. So Ner, it says Kish was the father of Saul, and Ner, the father of Abner, was the son of Abiel. So Abiel, if you remember, was the grandfather of Saul. So Kish and Ner were brothers, both sons of Abiel. And so Ner was Saul's uncle, and Abner was his son. That makes Abner his first cousin. So Abner was Saul's first cousin. So back then, they didn't have, thoughts about nepotism. That wasn't necessarily frowned upon. In one respect, you have to think, well, if Kish was really a very prosperous, big businessman kind of guy, very wealthy, a go-getter, and Saul is tall and showing a lot of these leadership qualities too, then, it kind of probably runs in the family. And so perhaps it's not wrong that he chose Abner. But in those days, usually family members were chosen for these positions. Nevertheless, a foolish king would put family in that position even if they weren't qualified. A wise king would only choose someone who's qualified. In this case, Abner, as we're going to see in the rest of the book, is qualified. He is actually a decent general. And I'm sure he's distinguished himself in battle already, which is part of the reason why he's been put in this role. What does his name mean? Well, his name means son of Ner, son of light. Technically, Ner means light. But I don't know there's a real prophetic meaning here or deeper insight other than Abner's name is just simply son of Ner. My dad's name is Ner. I'm his son. And it kind of shows the simplicity of Abner. He's a general. He's not a king. It's like I'm the bulldog. I'm the German Shepherd or the pit bull. You just feed me. Tell me who you want me to kill, Saul. I'll go after him. I'll get the army. We'll go do it. Okay. Very simplistic mindset. There are men who are like that. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing here with that name. Now, there was a fierce war with the Philistines all the days of Saul. And when Saul saw any strong man or any valiant man, he took him for himself. So the war with the Philistines continued all the days of Saul. That's an indication that there wasn't full holiness among the people. We saw that with the eating of blood. The holiness has started to slip. Because if there was full holiness, they would be done with these battles with the Philistines. The Philistines would have been thoroughly defeated. And they would have peace. But instead, they're having to continually fight, generally having victories, but the Philistines have not been defeated like the other peoples. But this last line, when Saul saw any strong man or any valiant man, he took him for himself, meaning he conscripted him into his army. And that is what Samuel warned Saul about. The people about. He said he's going to take your sons. So you think, well, yeah, of course, makes sense. Special forces, etc. Well, he didn't ask. He just took him, right? I want you to imagine you raise your son. You're proud of him. He's athletic, maybe smart. He's helping you in your field. You want to prosper too. You've got all these sons. You think these sons are going to help me build my farm, and plow for me and keep it going in my old age. We're going to have a nice family here. And here comes Saul driving by, riding by, saying, yeah, you got some strapping young men there. They're mine. And all of a sudden he takes your sons. You don't get to see them much anymore, except once in a while. They're in his army, and they're at risk of death. And you suddenly don't have your workers to help you, and you are having to be worried about them. So this isn't a nice situation, right? This is very different from before when he would call up Israel to battle. Now Saul is establishing a standing army. Very different. Okay, that is all for 1 Samuel chapter 14. We're getting close to where David's going to come into the scene. Today is Friday, so I don't know for those who are watching later, but for those who are following live, etc., today's Friday, so that means we'll be continuing with 1 Samuel chapter 15 on Tuesday, most likely. But I probably will have some other videos that I post up between now and then, and we'll be joining each other tomorrow for the next step in the path of strength to break the fast. So you guys have a great day. God bless you, and stay in his word.